I felt that way for sure. I felt like college for me was a dead end. There was no way. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't really, like, my mom or grandmother had never gone. Really nobody in my family had gone, so I didn't know who to go to say, like, how do I do this?
I think it's important to try to be strategic in the way in which you build your own future. But sometimes the things that you think are the worst thing at the time end up being the best thing ever. And that's just true. I've seen that time and time again.
Next Level Nation, welcome back to another very special, as always, episode of Next Level University, where we teach you how to level up your life, your love, your health, and your wealth. We hope you enjoyed our latest episode, number 1061. Do you realize how much your family is influencing you? Today, for episode number 1062, sometimes dead ends are just detours. Number one, that is a beautiful title, if I do say so myself. Number two, it is early, so anytime you tune into the podcast and my voice sounds abnormally deep, that's because it's early in the morning and Alan and I are still half asleep. We were on a call with Brandon, shout out to Brandon on the NLU team, last week, I think, and we were talking about Microsoft Excel and Google Sheets. We do a lot of work in Google Sheets. And I proceeded to tell Alan and Brandon this story that I don't know if I'd ever told. I think you've heard it, Alan, but I knew Brandon had never heard it. And we were talking about how Brandon was learning about spreadsheets. And he said, yeah, I didn't know how to do that. And Alan said, don't worry, I'll take care of it. And I said, Brandon, let me tell you a little story. I said, at one point, I was, and you'll know this if you're a podcast listener, but at one point, I was working in the quote-unquote construction industry, and I was traveling all the time. So just as an example, during 1 year, I spent 10 months on the road. Every single week, I was living in hotels, and I ended up making $100,000 that year. Awesome. I love that. After I made the money, I did not want to travel anymore. So I had a conversation with my company, and we were doing an internal hire for somebody to be a project manager. And that meant a lot of spreadsheets. And I said, well, whatever, I can figure that out. So I proceeded to apply for this job, and if I got this job internally within my company, I would have gone from $100,000 a year traveling to like $50,000 a year, but sitting in an office every day. And I was like, hell yeah, I want to do that. I don't want to travel anymore. And I go in, I do the interview, they ask me these mock questions, and I left, and I was like, I just crushed that. This is awesome.
What questions did they ask you?
Oh, man. A lot of them were operations questions. It was like, if you had a crew at this building and they couldn't get in, and you had a crew at this building and they were in the school and they forgot something, what would you do? And I was like, I got this. I'm a G. This is going to be fine. I get a call.
That's what you said? Yeah. Nice.
I get a call. No, I didn't say that. But obviously. I got a call. I think I got a call a week and a half later. And they're like, hey, please come into the office. We want to talk about your application. And I was like, I got this. This is perfect. Nobody's going to make you come into the office if you don't get the job. I was like, this is great. Let's celebrate. So I drive an hour and 15 minutes from Worcester, Massachusetts to, where were we? Newton, Massachusetts, which is just outside of Boston. And I go into the office and we sit down and they're like, unfortunately, you didn't get the job. And I was like, wait, you couldn't just told me that over the phone or via email? You made me drive all the way out here? I just wasted like 3 hours of my day for this. And they said,
one of the funniest things I've ever heard.
It was brutal. It was brutal. And they said one of the reasons why is the other candidate had more experience in Microsoft Excel. And I was like, oh, okay. And the reason I'm telling this story is because I told Brandon, I said, I literally tried to lose $50,000 to take a different job, and they wouldn't give me the job because I didn't know Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets. And now we make way more money than I ever have, and I know way more about Microsoft Excel than I ever would have if I worked at that company. It's very interesting how that dead end ended up becoming a detour for something later in life, but I never would have known that if I stopped there. I never would have known that if I just used that as a dead end and say, well, I'm just going to continue doing the job that I'm doing. And here's the other interesting point. And I told Alan, this was kind of my intention for this episode. If I got that office job, I probably never would have left because I never would have been miserable enough. I never would have had that conversation with Alan, and I never would have had that moment sitting on the edge of the bed debating suicide. So that detour quite literally changed everything. I bet you this podcast would not, I know it would not exist in the way it does today if I got that office job. So it, in retrospect, is the best detour that ever could have happened, even though at the time it seemed like a roadblock.
Something that you, The Rock says this too. He says something that you wished so badly would happen was actually the best thing that never happened. For him, it was getting into the NFL.
Yeah.
Because now obviously his career has been magnificent. And he said if he got in the NFL, it never would have been the same, right? And for you, if you had gotten that office job, and by the way, that was before when you messaged me with suicidal ideation?
Yeah. Yeah,
so if
because
you had gotten that job...
That was kind of my way out. It was like, if I got that job, I was burning the candle at both ends, and I realized me traveling the way I was not sustainable. That's why I was willing to take a $50,000 a year pay cut. Yeah.
Wow. Interesting.
They said no.
They said no.
Come
to
on
the
in.
Kid.
Come on in. Donuts and coffee.
An hour and 15-minute drive.
Yep.
And then you got there all dressed to the nines, ready to rock, ready to start your first day.
And they were like,
nope.
Not going to work.
Not going to work.
Wait. You have my direct line in my email. You could have just kind of forwarded that over to me. You didn't have
simple. You ever see Billy Madison, the movie? A simple no would have been just fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like at no point was anything you just said a coherent thought. Like, okay, a simple no would have been just fine.
It was like The Dark Knight where Morgan Freeman flies out to Tokyo or I don't remember where they are.
Oh,
Hong
yeah,
Kong.
yeah.
And he's like, as a token of my respect, I wanted to come see you. And it was the same thing. They were like, well, we wanted to tell you face to face. Over the phone would have been fine. Would have been totally fine. I wouldn't have felt any level of disrespect. But that's just the way it worked.
Well, in The Dark Knight, he had some other plans for why he had to go there. But for them, I wonder.
They did too. They just didn't know it.
So Kev and I talked about this prior to recording, and he asked me to think of a time when my life trajectory would have changed, and I thought of a bunch of different ones. One of them that he mentioned briefly was like when I didn't end up applying to MIT because my guidance counselor said that I wouldn't get in. And to this day, that I think is one of the biggest regrets I ever have, not because I didn't go to MIT or any of that, but because I didn't even try. And I think that there's something to be said for that too. And Kev, at least you tried and did apply. And so I think there's something to be said for try, just because things don't work out doesn't mean that you should stop, or I think it should motivate you. It certainly has with me. But the other story that I had was, so for the new listeners, I used to do a lot of gaming growing up. So if you're older and you ever played video games when you were younger and you're my age, so I'm 33 years old, you'll recognize all these games. So StarCraft 2, Diablo 2, Halo 2, Halo 3. Call of Duty, one of the first Modern Warfare games, Modern Warfare 2, that kind of stuff. So if you don't recognize any of those things, then you're either a lot younger than me and or didn't spend your childhood in front of the sticks, or on the sticks, I should say. So my friends and I growing up were some of I'm just being very direct, we were some of the best Halo players in the world. So one of the guys' names is Dan. I actually ran into him at a wedding a couple years ago, and he and I had like a giant conversation, and he genuinely talked to me about the regrets about this, of how like if we knew what we were. So he had a 2v2 partner, Dan, and I forget the other guy's name, honestly. I really do. And then I had my friend Nick and we were 2v2 Halo 1. So this was before the internet. Not before the internet, I'm sorry. This was before like massive multiplayer online. So this is before Xbox Live. This is before there was actually like easy online gaming. So the very first Xbox had an Ethernet cord for System Link, but it didn't have internet. It didn't have like a way to connect. Xbox Live didn't exist. So what you had to do, Kev, is you had to use a program on your computer called XB Connect. And essentially what you would do is you'd plug your computer into your router, and then you'd plug the Xbox into the router. And then it would simulate as if you were doing a System Connect. So it would simulate. So let's say Kevin's doing this while I'm doing it. We would connect on this XB Connect software, and then it would simulate my Xbox directly connected to his Xbox, as if we were doing a system link, is what it was called. So anyways, we used to play that all the time, like Nick and I, and then Dan and his friend as well. And Dan and I were at this wedding, and he was talking about how if us four got together, we would have had one of the best Halo teams on the planet. And that's valid. That is genuinely valid. And granted, this is all we did back then. So, we invested the time. So anyways, there was this event. I remember I was playing with these really, really good people regularly back then. And my friend Nick, who was my best partner, he was a 2v2 partner. He was incredibly good at the game. His parents hated when he played. His parents didn't want him to play a lot. His mom in particular, because she didn't think video games were going to be a big part of the future. And she was extremely wrong about that, because obviously esports is huge. So anyways, but she couldn't have anticipated streaming and sponsorships and, tournaments all over the world. And right. So a lot of people didn't know how big video games would be. So anyways, we get invited out to this, essentially what MLG, Major League Gaming, it was the biggest gaming company back then. I don't know if it still is. I seriously doubt it. And by gaming, I mean tournament. They host tournaments all over the world. So I went to MLG Providence back in the day. So for example, and they get all the pro gamers together and they compete. It's sort of like a sports arena, but for video games. So anyways, I'm 16 years old or something like that, and maybe 15. And they sponsored an event to fly out all of the best Halo 1 players in the world. There was a guy named Zyos. If you were into Halo back then, you'd know these names. Ogre 1, Ogre 2, Zyos, Strong Side, who was on my team for a time. And so anyways, his mom and his parents wouldn't let him go. And understandable, because they had no idea that this was going to be a thing. I think they just thought he was addicted to video games. And there's a lot of parents that are very concerned about that right now in the world, understandably. So that was kind of my story of if I had gone to that tournament, whether this is going to sound egotistical or not, I'm just going to say it, I would have been identified as one of the best players on the planet, and I do know that. And my whole career in esports might have been different, because I really was one of the best Halo 1 players in the world in hindsight. And I knew I was good back then. I just didn't know how good. You don't really, there's no ranking. You kind of know because you've played against the best players in the world, but you don't really know because there's not a lot of stats back then. There was no Bungie.com. There was no Xbox Live. There was no, online ranking thing. So then Halo 2 comes out, and I was 20th in the world on the rankings in Halo 2. And by then, Nick had already kind of not been able to play much, and us as a 2v2 team were not able to. And at the end of the day, and I'll just share this quickly, we know on this podcast that the number one most important aspect to your success or failure in life, other than self-belief, is who you surround yourself with. And if Dan and his partner and Nick and myself all got together regularly and competed against each other to get better, I mean, it would have been off to the races. So I had a little bit of a semi-pro gaming career early in my life, in hindsight. And I probably never would have ended up going to WPI. I probably never would have ended up, in corporate America like I did and that kind of thing. I probably would have ended up with an esports career. And then this podcast might not be a thing. So in hindsight, it's interesting because when we were at that wedding and I was talking to Dan. Dan has massive regret around this. He has a lot of regret around this because his parents wouldn't let him go either. Because he's 16 and the parents have no idea what this is about. What are you're going to fly out to play games? What is this about, right? Whereas now it's so obvious, right? That's a good thing to do. But we were talking about it at the wedding. He has massive regret. I honestly didn't. That's the interesting thing is he wishes that happened still. And I kind of don't, because I'm obviously grateful for all of this. And at the end of the day, playing video games for a ton of money would have been awesome. But what we do right now is way more deeply meaningful than whether or not I was going to be a competitive gamer. And I'll share this story very, very briefly, Kev. I went to MLG Providence when I was in college. I was probably 20 years old, probably 20. And I remember I saw one of the kids I used to play with there. And that was really hard for me because there's these Dr. Pepper girls or whatever that are all dressed up and, beautiful, and he was signing autographs, and there was a freaking line out the damn MLG Providence Place Mall. There was a line out the door for this guy signing autographs, and this guy I kicked off my team. Literally, he kept taking my
sniper.
He stole a sniper rifle.
Yeah.
And he ended up going to one of the best teams in the world. It's called Final Boss. Again, you'll know what I'm talking about if you ever played games back then.
Hello everyone at G6. My name is Roberta. I'm glad to be connected with all of you. We had a wonderful last few months, encouraging each other, keeping each other accountable, especially Lynn. Thank you very much for being there. And it's been an amazing journey. One thing I wanted to highlight, what it was done for me, is it has helped me to reprioritize. I think I was suffering from people pleasing, and especially with this online space, everybody just coming to sell you whatever they are selling and their group and their funnels, whatever it is. And in being nice, there's a lot of time I wasted on things that are not in alignment with what I want to do with my life. I wasted so much time, and this accepting friend requests of people who are not in alignment with what you're doing, because we live in a world where everybody asks you how many followers you have, and they think that's where the value comes from. I am done with that. I'm rejecting friend requests and group requests that are not in alignment with whatever I'm pursuing. So this has been a life changer for me, because I realized how much time I wasted not being productive, but just because I'm being nice to people, and I'm done doing that. Because I've learned to prioritize things that help me become a better person. If someday in the future, 5-10 years from now, I want to pursue those things they were selling, and I respect the hustle, I may go back to those things. But right now, whatever it is I'm doing, I am not accepting any invite, anything that is not in alignment with my purpose and my mission right now. And I realized, as I said, how much time I had wasted. I thought I needed time management classes just to keep up, but it just was not for me. And it's been surreal, actually. Even when they message me and they try to be nice, I know all of those scripted sales pitches, and they try to be nice to you and say, we will help and with this and with that. I told one guy actually on the message, I said, I'm sorry, I hear what you're saying, but no, this is not for me, but thank you very much for reaching out, which I would have not done in the past. So this has been a game changer for me. Thank you very much for the group coaching. It's been an eye-opener, and I hope everyone's journey continues to rise.
And he ended up being one of the best players on the planet. So, and you know what's interesting is back then I was a stronger player. And so that just is a testament. That was hard for me. That was hard. Because at 20, you know, none of this had really worked out yet. And I was still a lost 20-year-old for the most part. And I hadn't started my first company back then yet, Campus Libre. But I remember seeing that. And he was like famous, signing autographs, wealthy. And I was like so depressed. I ended up drinking that night. Like that was hard for me. It was a good mirror though, because it was like, okay, look at my missed opportunities. Look at what gifts I squandered. And for me, it always motivated me. So here we are, and I don't regret any of it. I do regret not applying to MIT, but other than that, I mean, you don't always know. And to the point of this whole episode, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can't connect some dots looking forward. I think it's important to contemplate the future. I think it's important to try to connect dots in advance. I think it's important to try to be strategic in the way in which you build your own future. But sometimes the things that you think are the worst thing at the time end up being the best thing ever. And that's just true. I've seen that time and time again.
Alan, so I didn't go to college. If you listen to this podcast, you might know that. You might not, because that's not something... I think Alan and I are very opposite when it comes to most things, but that's not something we usually talk about. I applied to 2 colleges, Alan. I applied to Fitchburg State, and I applied to Dean College. And I got into both of the colleges that I applied for. It's not that I couldn't have gone if I didn't want to. But I remember for a while, there was a couple times where I was like, I have definitely made a large mistake here. When I'm job hopping from, the gas station to cleaning toilets at the hospital, it was like, oh, what have I done? Like, am I in trouble here? Did I make a short-sighted decision based on ego or on me being just stubborn?
What was that?
I remember that. Oh, it was scary. It was
scary, right?
Yeah, it was scary because I didn't necessarily feel in control of my future, and podcasts were not a thing. I mean, that even if they were a thing, I don't it wouldn't have mattered because
they were not a big thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but that was interesting for me. I felt that way for sure. I felt like college for me was a dead end. There was no way. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't really like. My mom or grandmother had never gone. Really, nobody in my family had gone, so I didn't know who to go to say like, how do I do this? Like, how do I file for financial aid? I don't know how to pick classes. Like, I don't know what to do with all this. So for me, it seemed like a dead end, which in retrospect is probably one of the best decisions I ever made for me.
You know what's so interesting, Kev? I know we got to jump here. All that stuff, if there's any younger people listening right now, all that stuff seemed so challenging back then.
Yeah.
Like picking classes and, meeting all those new people and moving into the dorm. It's so interesting how, like, in a way, all of that would be such a joke for us now. Mm. It wouldn't, like, can you imagine being overwhelmed by, like, which classes to choose? It's like, you just grow so much, it's like, and even talking about the gaming, it's like, I remember feeling really depressed about seeing him. Like, that was really hard for me because back then when you're a little boy, and again, I'm not a little boy at 20 years old, but you really are. You're still such a child in comparison because of the compound effect of learning over time. And I remember being really, really upset by that because this person who you used to play with is getting all of what everyone thinks they want, which is fame and fortune. And it's just interesting because in hindsight, it's like, that's great and that's cool and, nice, right? But I don't know. I think the takeaway for me on this episode, unexpectedly, all of the stuff you're doing feels so overwhelming at the time. And it feels so difficult, and it feels so uncertain, and it feels so, like, depressing sometimes and defeating at times. But it's really just about the growth. Because you're going to look back at 33, 34, 35, 40, 45, 50, and you're going to be like, honestly, in hindsight, that really wasn't that big of a deal, And don't get me wrong, I'm not minimizing the emotions in the moment, but I think it's important to take yourself out of that for a second and just say, they say like one day we'll look back and laugh on this. It's like Tony Robbins says, well, why wait? Let's just laugh now. I understand what he's saying. I think that don't underestimate how much you can become over time through all these things. Even you just talking about, like, I didn't know how to pick classes. I didn't know how to apply for financial aid. I remember interviewing for WPI. I went to the interview there. And in hindsight, I didn't know this then, but they're looking for students like me. There was no chance I didn't get into that school, right? And because they're literally, now I'm on the other end of it, thinking of it like a business. The business of WPI, of course they need people to come and spend $50,000 a year to come to their school. Like they're looking for me. But I didn't know that back then. Back then it's like, oh my God, am I going to get in? Like, and all that. It's like, I just understand the world at such a deeper level now. And I think that when you're younger, climbing whatever ladder you're climbing, whatever mountain you're climbing, just realize that a lot of the hardest stuff along that way is actually going to benefit you the most in the long run, even though it really does not feel that way at all at the time. And that's the problem. It feels, so many times it feels like the end, when in reality it's the beginning of a whole new chapter. I know that sounds super fortune cookie, but it's really very true.
It is. I'll wrap it up with this. I'll end it. I'll make it come full circle. The person who got the job that I applied for was somebody who I'd worked with many times. He was on the crew. I was foreman for many of the jobs he was on, and he ended up getting the job over me. And he ended up reaching out to me, I don't know if it was like a year later, after I left. And he said, like, hey, I see the podcast has like really become something, and that's something we used to talk about. And it was, for me, obviously part of it was ego. It was like, hell yeah. But, but it also was a reminder of if I was in the position he was in, none of this would be happening. It wouldn't be happening the way it is. I wouldn't have the pain. I wouldn't have the story. I wouldn't have the experience. I wouldn't have the necessity. So, yeah, and it's weird. Everything seems like it's the end of the world, but it usually isn't. It's usually the start of a new world, a new opportunity at least. Maybe not a new world, but it depends on what you do with it.
And if you can find a way to build a life that is deeply meaningful and fulfilling to you, all that stuff in the past that might have felt like regret or pain or remorse or defeat becomes something more. You know, because if Kevin and I are sitting here unfulfilled, building a life we don't love, we probably would be singing a different tune about like what could have been. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's the real deepest takeaway is when you do build a life that you love, which is what this podcast is about, then you're going to look back at those regrets and you're going to realize that they were a good thing in hindsight. But if you stay stuck and if you don't use them as lessons and do something with them to build a life you love, like if we didn't love our lives right now, Kev, we would not be saying, oh, I'm so grateful I didn't go fly across the country as a pro gamer. Like, of course I'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe I screwed that up. And honestly, the person at that wedding I was talking to, it was like that. And that was really hard for me too, because in that conversation, I wanted to tell him, I'm glad we didn't go because my life is so amazing. But his life, I don't think, has turned out the way he wanted. And so he's singing a completely different tune. So keep that in mind, listeners, as well. One of the reasons Kevin and I have such an optimistic view about our poor decision-making in the past is because of where we've ended up. And where we've ended up is magnificent. So we're very blessed.
We are very blessed. We are very blessed. And I would add this, and this is just a thinking point for the listeners. That person could have realized they made a mistake and then gone back and tried again.
Oh, for sure. They still could if they wanted.
Right? So I think it's what you do with it. What do you do with the new awareness? What do you do with the regret? I think that's an important thing. Yeah, we're very optimistic because it's worked out for us, but we didn't always think it was I didn't always think it was going to. I know you did. But
eventually,
some might argue that eventually you were more delusional than I in the best way possible, and it's worked out swimmingly for us. Next Level Nation, as you know, we have a little business within Next Level University called Next Level Podcast Solutions, and we crunched the numbers recently, and we have through Next Level Podcast Solutions quite literally produced thousands of podcast episodes. If you're a podcaster and you're looking for help, please reach out to me directly, and I'll also have my link for a free 30-minute call in the show notes. I'm not going to try to sell you on anything. I just want to add as much value as humanly possible. And if you're in this community, you obviously have a message, you have a mission, and you have a purpose greater than yourself. And if you want to share it with the world, I would love to help you do it.
If we had us in the beginning, we talk a lot about failing forward. And we failed forward a lot. It would not have gotten rid of all, if we had us, it wouldn't have gotten rid of all the pain and suffering or challenges, but it definitely would have accelerated the learning. It definitely would have helped tremendously. Let's just say we would have been able to achieve probably what we've achieved in 2.5 years instead of 5. So if you want to accelerate, you want the Mario Kart booster, you want to start a podcast or grow your existing podcast, call Kev. He's the guy. He does. Thank you. I calculated it. He did 92 episodes in 28 days. So between other podcasts and meeting other podcasters all over the world and learning from all of them, plus the Podcast Growth University podcast that he does solo now, which obviously doesn't have Jeff on it. And then this one,
it's better.
It was
good. It's a good one.
Better. Yeah, I don't doubt it. I don't know about better, but I don't know if I can condone that. But 92 episodes in 28 days. I did the calculation while he was away in Colorado because I wanted to figure out what he's doing around here. I'm just joking. But yeah, seriously, call Kev. He knows more about podcasting from a holistic perspective than anyone I've ever met. Also, so if you've ever been wondering about this coaching thing, what is this about? I don't understand. Is it a therapist? Is it a coach? Am I going to achieve my dreams? What's the point? Because I was talking to, shout out to Brandon, a couple Brandon shout outs today. I was talking to Brandon last night. He's like, I don't think anyone could explain like what you do for them. It's like difficult to explain because it's always a deeper understanding. And I agree. I don't know if I know how to explain it. I'll get you to see the world a little differently. I'll get you to see yourself a little differently, and it'll make you behave in a way that is more virtuous and more in alignment with the success you want. So if you're curious about the coaching thing, jump on. I'm love to meet the listeners. I've been really excited. I've met a lot of listeners lately. So just book in my calendar 30 minutes. The link will be in the show notes, and there doesn't have to be some crazy agenda. You don't have to come and want to set the world on fire. It can literally just be a conversation of what's this coaching thing about. I'm not going to sell you a single thing. I just want to meet you. If you listen to this show, you're a part of the community, you're a part of the family, and I love to meet the listeners.
We love to meet everybody.
Mm-hmm.
You ready to go?
Oh, yeah, man.
You done with it? Next Level Nation, tomorrow for episode number 1063, why you need someone in your corner pushing you. I have some very, very, very good throwback stories for that episode. As always, we love you. We appreciate you. Grateful for each and every one of you. And at NLU, we do not have fans. We have family. We will talk to you all tomorrow. Have a wonderful Saturday.
Please reach out.